You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, we're going to be reviewing the ICC T20 World Cup for 2026. And I felt like this tournament was going on for an eternity. It started in early February and now has ended in early March. And India are three-time T20 World Cup champions, the first team to defend the title, to win back-to-back T20 World Cups, the first team to win three T20 World Cups in the history of the tournament, and also the first host nation to win a home T20 World Cup while hosting the tournament. And by far, they were the best team throughout this whole entire tournament. This tournament had many ups and downs. We saw some outstanding performances from many of the teams, individuals. We saw some centuries. We saw some wickets. We saw some close, exciting games, like the Afghanistan and South Africa game that had two super overs. And it was an up and down T20 World Cup, as you would expect in India and Sri Lanka. So joining me to dissect and discuss and unpack how this ICC T20 World Cup for 2026 went down is a good friend of the podcast, an Australian cricket fan, Jihan. Jihan, welcome back. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on. And just looking forward to dissecting the tournament and reliving the highlights, I suppose.
Well, yes, no doubt we will be doing that, Jihan, as we'll be talking about all the 20 teams in this review. So it's going to be a bit of a marathon, but we'll try our best to plow through them and not bore anyone out there. But first of all, Jihan, let's have a look back at how things went down in terms of the tables and the group stage and what happened in that part of the tournament, first of all. Not a surprise in Group A to see India and Pakistan qualify there. Group B, Zimbabwe was a bit of a surprise to qualify in Group B, along with Sri Lanka. Group C and Group D. Group C, West Indies and England qualified. Group D was South Africa and New Zealand. And then into the Super 8s, South Africa, India from Group 1 qualified for the semis, and then England and New Zealand qualified from Group 2 to the semi-finals in the Super 8 stage. So that's pretty much what happened in the group and Super 8 stages of this T20 World Cup in terms of the teams qualifying from the group stage to the Super 8s and then eventually to the semi-finals. Let's have a look at some of the stats in this T20 World Cup for 2026. The leading run scorer, not a surprise there to see Farhan at the top of the list. Most runs at a T20 World Cup, surpassing Virat Kohli's record, 383 runs. And he got 200s in the tournament, which was phenomenal batting from Farhan. So he was the leading run scorer, leading wicket taker. It was joint there for the top position, 14 wickets apiece for Bumrah and Chakravarti. Not a surprise to see those two up there, as India were the informed team in the tournament. Most dismissals as a wicketkeeper in the tournament was Khan from Pakistan. He had 10. And finally, the most catches was Glenn Phillips. Not a surprise to see him. He's always good in the field. He took 11 catches in this tournament as New Zealand went on to play India in the final. Unfortunately, weren't able to get the job done. But not a surprise to see Glenn Phillips top the fielding stats there with the most catches in the tournament. So that's pretty much all the stats from this T20 World Cup. Let's have a look back at how the results panned out in the semi-finals and final. So the first semi-final was South Africa and New Zealand. And New Zealand won by 9 wickets in that game. And Finn Allen was the player of the match. Not a surprise after his 100 in that game. The second semi-final saw India and England go ahead against each other. A high-scoring affair at the 1KT, but India were able to win by 7 runs in the end, and Sanju Samson was the player of the match. Not a surprise, given his form in this tournament. And then finally, the final saw India and New Zealand at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. Not a surprise to see India win by 96 runs. Jasprit Bumrah was player of the match, and India T20 World Cup champions for 2026. And not a surprise to see Sanju Samson as the player of the tournament. He had a very good tournament with the bat. He didn't play many games, but he scored a lot of runs in those games that he played. And he was able to help India win this tournament. So that's pretty much what happened in the semi-finals and finals in terms of the results there. Now then, Jihan, let's have a look back at all the 20 teams in this T20 World Cup, talk about all their performances and what went well and what didn't go so well in this tournament. We'll start with the champions, of course, India. Not a surprise that they won this T20 World Cup. They were clearly the best team in the tournament. And as I mentioned in the intro, the first team to win 3 T20 World Cups, the first host nation to win a T20 World Cup while hosting the tournament, and the first team to win consecutive T20 World Cups back-to-back. Not a surprise. They were pretty good in the group stage. They were undefeated. They only had 1 loss in the Super 8s, and that was against South Africa in the first game. But then in the semi-final against England and the final against New Zealand, they were unstoppable. Jihan, your thoughts on India? How did you think they went about their business in this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they were clearly the best side in the tournament, weren't they? I said in our preview that India are probably going to win this tournament. They had the best record leading up to it in the 2 years since the last one. In fact, they barely lost a match in T20 in the last 2 years, so they're always going to be the favourites. They never really got pushed or challenged, maybe apart from that first game against the USA, ironically, when they lost quite a few wickets. And
yes, they were
Sky
6 down for not many in that game.
Got them out.
Everyone thought, "Oh, here we go." They're a bit vulnerable, but after that, they were pretty much dominant, really, except for the game against South Africa, where they looked all at sea.
Yeah, exactly. So, Sky got them out of a bit of a hole in that game against USA. But, I mean, that can happen early on in the tournament, and it can happen against, I suppose, the Minnow side as well. So, I mean, that's not unusual for that sort of thing to happen to a really great or good side in the format. But apart from that, they lost that game to South Africa. I thought South Africa were the one team that could beat them in the tournament and in the finals, but they didn't. Obviously, South Africa didn't get through to the final. But but I mean, apart from that, you could say that it was the game against the West Indies. The West Indies pushed them, I suppose, but they still won pretty easily in the 20th over with wickets in hand. So. And then against England, I know the margin of defeat looks like it was a close game, but I think they had the game won by the 19th over in a very high-scoring game on a small ground. So, yeah, I mean, they really went through the tournament unchallenged, apart from that one slip up against South Africa.
Yes, well, I heard a stat that I may be wrong, but I did hear it, that I think they've played 32 games. And they've won 30 of them and lost 2.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how strong they are. And that's across, I think, T20 World Cups, this one and the last one. But and also, I think, the 50 over World Cup in 2023. So basically, from when they lost the final against Australia until now, that's including the Champions Trophy last year as well. They've been unstoppable. And since they broke the drought of ICC tournaments and not winning one for so long, they look unstoppable, Jihan. And you couldn't put it past them to win in 2 years' time, which will be a monumental achievement if this team can do a three-peat, which is not beyond them. After what we've seen in the last 2 T20 World Cups, there's clearly a big gap between India and the second best or the rest of the pack in international cricket. And we saw that in this T20 World Cup. Probably South Africa are within touching distance, but India probably out by 20 yards, or even, to put it in those terms, but they're marginally ahead of everyone else.
Yeah, I mean,
it's scary. To be honest, it's quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, they are well ahead of the rest of the teams in this format, particularly in the last couple of years. I mean, the batting is unbelievable. They just
Sanju Samson, he didn't play many games at all. I think he played what did he play, 3 or something? He came back into the side after being out for so long, and scores of 80 plus in all of those games, even the final. Player of the tournament, second leading run scorer, is unbelievable. Turn of form from him.
I mean, they've just got so many gun batters who are big hitters of the ball, sweet timers of the ball. And they're just used to these wickets as well, like good batting wickets, ball coming onto the bat. Not a huge amount of pace and bounce, but enough pace in the wicket to play your shots. And they're obviously, they play so much IPL cricket. They're just used to playing this kind of cricket, and they just have really attacking, big hitting batsmen. And throughout the order, they've got a good 6 or 7 of them can score a 200 strike rate if they need to.
Yes,
which I think some of the other, not a lot of the other teams have. And they're good against spin as well as they are against the pace bowling. So, and they're used to these pitches. These are the pitches they play their IPL on. So I mean, the only time I saw them vulnerable in recent times was a game at the MCG on a pitch with a bit of pace and bounce, where Josh Hazlewood actually rattled them a little bit. But if you're playing on the same pitch as you are going to be playing on, in the IPL in a tournament, then everyone in that team knows what to expect and knows the conditions well. And it's hard to beat on those pitches.
Yes, well, I suppose before the tournament started, a lot of people said, if there's one team to score 300, it's probably India. And they nearly did it on 2 occasions against, obviously, New Zealand in the final and England. Scoring 250 plus in 2 games in a row is unheard of.
And it's also, obviously, it's not just the batting as well. They've got Bumrah, who... it's hard to take him past 5-6 runs and over in a 4 over spell. He can take wickets as well. And they've got some decent spinners in the middle, like Chakravarti. Just Axar Patel, I like. He's sort of understated. He comes in, he bowled in the power play in the final yesterday. And even if he goes for like 8-9 runs and over, he's taking wickets at key times. And it's never, it's not with mystery balls or anything like that. It's just with changes of pace, arm balls, putting pressure on batsmen by not allowing them to score and forcing the big shots. So, so they've got, if they get 250 on the runs on the board, they've got the bowling to defend that as well.
Yeah, I suppose, if the batters are scoring big scores like 250 plus, of course, the bowlers are going to be happy with that and take wickets because of the scoreboard pressure. And that's what we saw against New Zealand in the final and also against England in that semi-final. And pretty much throughout the tournament, really. But do you think, Jihan, that this is probably their peaking moment in T20 cricket India? Their sweet spot in terms of, like Australia when they won those 3 World Cups in a row in one-day cricket, different format. But this is sort of like that for India, but in T20 cricket. They've sort of hit that sort of sweet spot where they're peaking at the right time, and these group of players coming through are just dominating. And they could continue that in 2 years' time, as we mentioned a bit earlier. But do you think that this is, arguably probably their best period in T20 cricket, and most certainly dominant period when it comes to, ICC events in general?
Look, I mean, if you're talking purely about T20, possibly they probably have the best T20 players in the world. It's not surprising given, the IPL and how often they play and how much importance is given to that. I suppose the question for me is whether they can replicate this on faster bouncy wickets. I think the next one is it's in Australia and New Zealand, isn't it? The next ODI World Cup, I think, is in South Africa as well. So I think on those sort of pitches, the playing field is a little bit more leveled a little bit more, or will be. So that will be the question for me. But I think right now they have the best T20 players in the world, and probably closely followed by South Africa. And when you think about it, it's not surprising given South Africa's involvement in T20 franchise cricket and how that's become a huge thing in the last couple of years with the investment they put into that. So I think mostly potentially in T20 cricket they may dominate for a while. I'm not going to say that's going to be the case across all formats, though.
Yeah.
Because actually, when you think about it, sorry to interrupt, but when you think about it, like when you look at this team, how many of these players are going to be playing ODI and Test cricket? Probably not that many. They're all IPL players, mostly.
No, they're all IPL or T20 specialists, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, a lot of them have played Test cricket, but not a lot of late. So, yeah, that definitely helps as well in terms of being a specialist, and that certainly helps. But they are strong, and clearly the best team in the tournament, and that's why they won.
Yeah,
it was just dominance, really. So who knows what they can do in 2 years' time in the next T20 World Cup? But definitely creating that legacy and dynasty, and certainly the floodgates have opened in terms of them having success at ICC events again. India, for a long time there, they didn't have many. Didn't have much success in terms of winning trophies until they won the T20 World Cup 2 years ago, and now it's really has sort of come around for them, really, which is good for them. And winning the home tournament, I suppose it makes up a little bit for the disappointment of what happened in the 50-over World Cup 3 years ago, I suppose. Yeah, we lost that one against Australia. That happened. But I suppose this is a consolation prize to win 3 years later, and sort of get some sort of revenge back there, somewhat. But clearly the best team in the tournament, and thoroughly deserved their victory, India. And that's why they are 3-time T20 World Cup champions. Let's talk about New Zealand, Jihan, runners-up, and that was their best result in this tournament. As you would expected, they qualified from the group stage. They were pretty much good, except for the game against South Africa, where they struggled. The Super 8s, bit of a dicey moment there. They were facing elimination, possibly. But Pakistan weren't able to qualify against Sri Lanka, so New Zealand went through on net run rate in the end. Probably their best game was the semi-final against South Africa. They probably saved their best game for the semi-final, but they didn't do that in the final against India, where they absolutely got smashed and didn't have their best day, you have to say. So I suppose for New Zealand, the bad day that they had was actually in the final. Contrast that to the semi-final against South Africa. They were good up until that point, and the bad day that they had was in the semi-final. So that's what happens in T20 cricket. But your thoughts on New Zealand, Jihan? Consistent performers in ICC events. They're always thereabouts in semi-finals or finals. They didn't have a great T20 World Cup 2 years ago in the US and the Caribbean. They didn't qualify for the Super 8s, but this one in India, I suppose with most of the players in the squad playing the IPL, knowing the conditions, they did pretty well. And unfortunately, they weren't able to beat India, which is just, as we've already talked about, with India's strength, they're just miles ahead of everyone else in international cricket. But your thoughts on New Zealand? How did you think they went in this tournament? Did you think, made it to the final? That's a pass. Or do you think they'll be disappointed in the way that they played in the final, really, and probably should have saved it up and probably put in a different performance against South Africa?
To be honest, my feelings about New Zealand and the way they played in this tournament is pretty much how I viewed New Zealand for the last 25 years. They're always there or thereabouts in tournaments. They punch well above their weights. They get the most out of their players who, individually, person per person, probably aren't as talented as some of the more, the top nations. And I think, even if you look at this tournament, it's a pretty up and down performance. They were struggling again in that game against Afghanistan, and they just about managed to pull it out of the bag towards the end of, probably in the last quarter of that game. They got easily beaten by South Africa. They got relatively easily beaten by England as well. And and even the game against Sri Lanka, they were all over the place in that first 3 quarters of the
yes,
their
they
batting
were.
innings.
It wasn't until Mitchell Sapner and McConkey got them over the line in that partnership. And Sri Lanka, really, we'll talk about that later about Sri Lanka, but they were really poor, really.
Sri Lanka completely lost the plot. They went from being completely all over them to just randomly letting them get a reasonable score by letting it go in the last 5 overs, and then deciding to play Test cricket when they came out to bat. So that was almost, it was New Zealand won with so much pressure, and just Sri Lanka completely let them off the hook, as if to say, all right, that's all right, you can win this game, it's fine. But that's kind of how that game played out. And then they lost to England.
They should have won against England, but obviously that they were in a position to win that quite comfortably. It wasn't until Will Jackson, Rian Ahmed did what they did.
Yeah,
that happens.
But I think if you're serious about winning a tournament, you've got to put teams away like that.
Yes, that's true. Maybe they should have got their bowling sort of combinations right towards the end of that. That was questioned, but nonetheless. That's the way it was, and then obviously the semi-final.
The semi-final.
Was very clinical.
Well, the semi-final, I just didn't see that coming. I thought South Africa would beat them. I thought maybe fairly convincingly. Otherwise, close-ish game, but they would come out on top. South Africa would come out on top, but it's not how it played out. That's what can happen when you bat first and you either lose quick wickets in the power play, or you just steadily keep losing wickets at intervals and you don't quite get the score that you probably should have done. I think that's what happened, and then New Zealand came out to bat with a license, and 2 guys opening the batting came off. So I thought that was I didn't see that coming. I thought that was kind of against the run of play of the tournament, but fair play to them. They they bulldozed their way into the final with the way they played in that second innings there. But just come the final, what I've said is I've maintained consistently that what happens with New Zealand is they punch above their weight for up until a point in tournaments, and then they get shown up for that not quite having that same ability of as the other sides, or that same clutch ability as a team. And I think in the old days they used to just about get to semi-finals, probably when other teams deserve to be there more than them. And then these days they've gone one step further, they're getting to finals, but they're still not winning them, right? They've won the World Test Championship final, but Australia should really been in that one, owing to poor over rates. They didn't get through, but so they make it, and then they to a final, to a semi-final, and then they just can't. They're just not good enough to take that extra step. And the final against it, I was watching last night, and I don't know if they were under pressure or they seemed like they felt the pressure a lot with the ball, and I felt like they were bowling absolute rubbish in the power play, and then that just. I think after 6 overs, India pretty much won the game. I can't remember what they got, 90 odd. It was 72 after 5 overs, 90 after 6.
It was 90 odd in the power play, nearly 100 basically.
Yeah, and I just watching the ball, like they kept bowling wide. So that's one thing I couldn't understand. So that's just pressure getting to them. Like there's literally wide after wide.
Well, they're trying to get it out of the arc of the hitting arc of the Indian batters.
Yeah,
they didn't quite execute that plan and paid the price.
Yeah, but I mean, you shouldn't be that intimidated in a power play. Like, you need to be trying to challenge the batsman. I think there was one shot where Lockie Ferguson, he went for so many runs. Maybe did he go for like 20 and over or something? He went for a lot of runs, and they hit a lot of boundaries off him. And there was this one ball which was a pretty decent ball, which was a length ball and on middle stump, and just about moved a little bit off the seam, went across Sanju Samson. He's tried to flick it over mid wicket. It's taken a leading edge, and I was like, okay, that's going to be out, and just flies over backward point for 6. And that's when I thought, okay, this is all going India's way. I can't see New Zealand, slowing these guys down, because even the false shots are going for 6. So I think they were. Yeah, if I'm honest, I think they were lucky to get into the final, and they showed, that they're not world champions. That's my brutal, take on the whole on how they played.
Yeah, well, you can't fault them for their consistency. They're always there. They're always performing well. It's just they can't really get the job done. Okay, 2019 World Cup against England. Okay, they got a bit of a raw deal there in the Super Over. Let's be honest about that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, everyone says that, but when you look at it, they shouldn't have let it get that close. They were well ahead to once I think Root got out. It's only Stokes and Butler right towards the end that when they suddenly started pushing them towards the end. Up until then, they were well ahead in the game. So, yeah, that's just what I mean. Like the clutch sides don't let that happen, and obviously England needed so much luck to even get it to a tie as they did, but it shouldn't have even been anywhere near that. Yeah.
No, that's true. But anyway, it was probably one of the greatest finals that we've seen in World Cup history. So I don't think many people will be disputing that. But yeah, they're always consistent performers, New Zealand, but they don't seem to get it done. They were a part of the Champions Trophy final last year against India as well. Made it to a second T20 World Cup final for them. They were a part of the one in 2021, which they lost to Australia in the UAE. And also 50 over World Cups, 2019, 2015. Did they make the semi-finals in 2023? I don't think they did. Or did they? Yes, they did. Sorry, they did. Which was against India, from memory. So they've always been consistent performers, but as you've alluded on there, Jihan, that they just can't seem to get it done. And I was also quite surprised to see Rachin Ravindra as the leading wicket taker for them. I was expecting probably Matt Henry to take that mantle, but Ravindra, quite a surprise to see him take 12 wickets and be the leading wicket taker. I suppose, he had a few games where he took 4 wickets in that, probably against UAE and Canada in the group stage. I think he took a few wickets there in those games. So, but yeah, Finn Allen did pretty well with the bat, Seifert. Outside of that, Phillips didn't have a tournament where he was profitable. And really, you just knew in the final that, once you get Allen and Seifert out, their batting seems to dip away.
Well, they just don't have any aura, do they? I mean, once they were put under a little bit of pressure in that power play, they just folded, and that was the game, pretty much.
Yeah, That's true. But yeah, that could be a reason. Yeah, but it's pressure. It's a T20 World Cup final. You're playing in front of 100,000 people in Ahmedabad, the biggest cricket stadium in the world. And you're up against a rampant Indian team that look unbeatable. So, of course, that's going to play on your mind. But, yeah, just another disappointing result for New Zealand. But consistent yet again. They should be proud in their efforts, but disappointed not to get over the line. So that's New Zealand and how they went about things in this T20 World Cup. We'll talk about South Africa, Jihan, and they were pretty good throughout the group stage. They were undefeated. The Super 8s, they were undefeated. They could have lost to Afghanistan in that Super Over. It shouldn't really have been a Super Over, really. It went to 2 Super Overs. Kahisa Rabada's last over in that game was pretty costly. I think he bowled 2 no balls, and South Africa dodged a bit of a bullet there. That could have been their first loss of the tournament, but that came in the semi-final against New Zealand. People say it was a choke. I wouldn't say it was a choke. I think they just got outplayed and really just had a bad day, really. And I think the coach of South Africa, Shukri Conrad, summed it up well in his press conference by saying it wasn't a choke. I think he said it was a bit of a mauling, I think. And they were a bit shell-shocked in that game as well. Just surprised at what was happening. But, you know, yet again, semi-finalists is not a bad result. And they were looking good. But you can be the favourite, you can look good. But the important games to win are the semi-finals and the final. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. Just had the bad day, really, in the semi-final. But, you know, South Africa, they're getting there. They're getting thereabouts. In the last few tournaments, they've done pretty well in terms of 50-over World Cup. 2023, they made it to the semi-final. The World Cup, T20 World Cup 2 years ago, they obviously lost the final to India in the West Indies. This one, they made it to the semi-finals. The Champions Trophy, there were semi-finalists as well. So they are challenging and being consistent, and hopefully it will happen for them. They have won the World Test Championship, but to really get the monkey off their back, they really need to win either a one-day cup or a T20 World Cup to really get that off their back. They haven't quite done it, but they could do it next year in the 50-over World Cup at home in 2027. But your thoughts on South Africa, Jihan? How did you think they went about performance-wise in this tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were the second best team in the tournament. I thought they were the one team that could beat India in the final, and they did beat India earlier on in the tournament quite convincingly. Yeah, and you like when you look at it, they lost one game all tournament, and that was a semi-final. New Zealand lost 3 games across the whole tournament, and a couple of those quite convincingly. But yeah, it's it's interesting. In our preview, I said that I called it that South Africa were going to lose to Afghanistan and not make it through to the Super 8s, and they almost
came off because it was a double Super Over.
Yeah, so that almost happened. But I think that game was more sloppiness, which is actually unusual for South African sides. They usually,
especially Kahisa Rabada in that last over, bowling 2 no balls.
Yeah, I mean that's what made it go to a Super Over. Just lack of discipline there.
And if we'll talk about it a bit later when we talk about Afghanistan. But if they held their heads and had a bit of composure, they could have won that game outright. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I thought they were going to beat. Well, I didn't think they were going to beat them, but that was a prediction I made that they wouldn't get out the group because they'd lose to Afghanistan. It almost happened. It's sloppiness, lack of discipline from Rabada towards the end there, and yeah, you're right. Afghanistan, if they ran properly, probably should have won that game outright. But going into the Super Over, you know, they didn't give up. They pushed it through to the second one. And, you know, if there's 24 to win off four balls, you're winning that 99% of the time, aren't you? So I think they had that game won. It was just a bit random how it ended up finishing. But yeah, I mean, that kind of thing can happen early on in the tournament. India had the hiccup, a little bit of a hiccup against the USA initially in that game. But no, I thought they were really good throughout the tournament. The game against the West Indies, who were looking pretty dangerous throughout the tournament.
That was probably their most clinical in terms of batting, really chasing down that score of 170 odd.
I thought they bowled.
West Indies look ordinary, really, in that game.
Well, I thought they bowled really well as well. They just kept, even though the West Indies were hitting 4s and 6s, they just kept getting wickets. And then there was a partnership. They got a lot of wickets in that game, and then in that innings, and then there was a partnership at the end between Holder and someone else. I can't remember who for the West Indies who got them
Shepherd,
from.
I think
Shepherd, yeah, who got them from what was probably going to be an average score to one that may be defendable, but it wasn't enough in the end. It wasn't enough by a long shot. So I thought that was the way South Africa played that game. Was very typical of South African teams over the years. Very professional. Once they started batting, they were winning that game easily. And then the game against New Zealand, they just I didn't see that happening, to be honest. Batting first, it's just one of those things where they just kept losing regular wickets and couldn't get any momentum, and they just about got to middling-ish score, but it was probably never going to be enough. And then New Zealand, the two openers, Seifert and Finn Allen, just took them apart, really. And I think in that innings, you started to see that they probably were lacking some variation in the bowling attack. It was all mostly fast medium, and not too much spin. So, which is that's fine. That works well in South Africa, but in the subcontinent, maybe a few more spin options may have helped them a bit more. But so I didn't see that semi-final coming. Even if they lost, I didn't think they were going to lose so convincingly. But yeah, as I said, I thought they were second best team in the tournament, and barring the Afghanistan game and that semi-final, they were pretty good, and they beat the finalists as well. So yeah, I think that was a good tournament overall. But they would have obviously wanted to get to the final and win it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, really. But do you think they're going to win a tournament very soon, Jihan? Because they are getting closer and closer with every tournament.
Yeah, I mean, the ODI World Cup's in South Africa, isn't it?
Yeah.
Next year. So that could go one of two ways. Either they're going to be really comfortable with the conditions and the home support, and that works in their favor, or they're going to feel the pressure.
like they did in 2003.
Yeah, like they did in 2003, and then that's gonna get to them. I mean, that was going to have been 24 years ago, but
obviously different team, different players, but still.
Yeah, I mean, there's no player playing in this one that would have played in that one. Yeah, so although having said that, some of the coaching staff may have been involved, but yeah, I think that's probably going to be their next best opportunity. They beat Australia, didn't they, in the Winter Series, 2-1 in the one-day series. So yeah, I'm finding ODI harder to call these days because no one hardly plays. Teams barely play, so you don't know who's good and who's not. And they only sort of find out who's good during the random series that they do play every now and then. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be their best opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see what happens. But yeah, definitely, there's one of the top teams in this tournament, South Africa. they'll be disappointed with another semi-final defeat, but it wasn't really a choke. They just didn't execute on the day, and that happens in T20 cricket. You need a bit of luck. New Zealand had a day out, and that happens. But they played some pretty good cricket up until that point, and they're getting there. South Africa, they're going to win a tournament eventually.
I think they're developing a lot of good players from the SAT20.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Specialist T20 players, but then they've also got all the the bowlers, Rabada, Ngidi, Nokia, Maharaj, Markram. I mean, these guys play all formats, so they've got a number of just high quality international players.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. So yeah, not a bad tournament from South Africa, but they'll be disappointed not to get all the way to the end. Let's talk about England, Jihan, and talk about their tournament. It was a bit of an up and down tournament, to be fair, from England. They looked a bit flaky for me. They should have lost to Nepal. That was a close game. Nobody expected that, but they won by 4 runs. They got beaten by the West Indies in the group stage, but then they bounced back against Scotland. Even the game against Italy nearly chased down 200 in the end. So England were pushed by Italy. And also the game against Scotland, they were pushed a little bit there as well. But in the Super 8s, they were dominant. They won all their games, basically, and they looked, well, I wouldn't say convincing. They just did enough to win. And that's what they did in the Super 8s. The semi-final, they just didn't handle the pressure of India, and India just went off and scored 250 odd. But Jacob Bethel scored that 100 and nearly gave them a sniff of doing the unthinkable. But in the end, it was just too much in the end. So, semi-finals again for England, back-to-back T20 World Cups. The one 2 years ago, semi-finalists. This one, semi-finalists. So I think they should be happy on that front, but disappointed not to go on until the end. But yeah, they looked up and down. They looked a bit flaky for my liking, Jihan. And obviously, as the tournament was progressing, we had some chats over WhatsApp, didn't we, about England and saying, oh, they look a bit shaky and a bit not convincing. But they certainly were. They just did enough, basically. They just did enough to win. So what are your thoughts on England, Jihan? Is it a pass or fail for them in this T20 World Cup?
I think it's a pass. I had them down as my dark horses for this tournament. After losing Australia, they actually played pretty well in warm-up series against Sri Lanka in the T20s and ODIs. So they won those in fairly foreign conditions. There was a game where Harry Brook, after they won, said the pitch was terrible. So I mean,
at least their preparation was spot on this time, unlike it was in the Ashes.
For the Ashes, yeah. So they had good prep for the tournament, and I always feel with England, like in T20, I feel like their bowling is pretty effective. So you got Jofra Archer, who can take wickets with a new ball, and it's hard to get away. It's hard to get after him, and then you've got guys like Sam Curran who come and bowl their licorice all sorts and are hard to get away.
Or moon balls.
And Jamie Overton's come in and has done a really good job. And then the one bowler that has been surprising in this tournament was Will Jacks. The teams have struggled to get him away.
He scored runs and took probably more wickets than he did in the Ashes.
Yeah, so he did well with the ball and got some runs. Adil Rashid is always, I suppose he can control the game in the middle overs and get wickets to give some control.
He got pumped in the game against Nepal, didn't he? But after that, he seemed to bounce back nicely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, mostly that's what he does, but it's not to say he can't get pumped. Like, he does from time to time. But yeah, I think overall the performance was very scrappy across the tournament, and in key games they just about did enough to get over the line. Nepal is a great example. I mean, they should have lost that game really, but it was Sam Curran's clutch final over that won it for them. The West Indies, they couldn't stop the West Indies big hitters, and they lost their way. In the one-run chase, which can happen against the West Indies. Italy, they were winning that game really, weren't they? But you've got a guy who comes in and scores a 50 off 20 balls and gives you a bit of a scare. It's not unusual for that to happen against the Minnow side. That does happen. I remember a game where in the 2003 World Cup where they almost lost to Namibia and chasing 270, and some guy called I can't remember his name. Some random just came in and smashed them everywhere and got close. So they got Namibia got close. But that kind of thing can happen against the Minnows. But I don't think Italy were ever really winning that game. So they did what they had to do there. Sri Lanka, that was a really good win. Again, Sri Lanka very disappointing with the bat. In fact, Sri Lanka, they start again similar to the game against New Zealand. They started off really well. Were restricting England. England just about got a score on the board, and as I said earlier, like England just bowled really well. They, test match, almost not test match style, but restrictive kind of bowling, and with the odd wicket, odd regular wicket, and that just completely derailed Sri Lanka. It wasn't like they was chasing 180 or 190. It was just 140 or something like that. It wasn't even that big a score, but the bowling was too good for Sri Lanka. So I think that's where England excels in the format. Against Pakistan, similar. I think it was going to be on that pitch. It was going to be difficult for them to chase down that score, but I thought that they handled the spinners quite well. Like, even though they lost wickets, they never got behind the run rate. And then when they were getting towards the end, Harry Brook goes on to get 100, and I think it was Will Jacks finishes it off at the end. So they were quite good in that sense that they just didn't collapse in a heap when the pressure was on, which other teams have tended to do. And then, beat New Zealand. So is that unsurprising given what I said about New Zealand earlier? But and then the game against India, I didn't actually watch that game, but in such a high-scoring game, and it was at the Wankhede Stadium, so pretty small ground, 6-hitting ground. Obviously conceded a huge score, but at least they gave it a shot. They were always losing it. I think they had to score 20 in the last over, so they weren't going to win. But they didn't collapse in a heap, so they gave it a good go. So I think that's a pretty good, particularly after what happened in the Ashes. I think that's a pretty good tournament for England.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, they did all right. They've done pretty well in T20 cricket of late, anyway. So, they're doing well in T20 cricket, unlike in the other formats as well. Well,
it's probably their best format now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. It's probably their best format at the moment for them as a group. But a tournament where they just did enough to win and qualify, but unfortunately weren't able to get over that final hurdle in the semi-finals against India, which they were always up against it. But they gave it a good go, as you said there, Jihan, in the run chase. But a surprise that England put in a good performance.
Well, they always used to have this excuse that we're concentrating on Test cricket and the Ashes. That's why we're terrible at one-day cricket. And then when they get humiliated in one-day cricket, they start concentrating on that, and then the Test performances fail, and they say, well, we're concentrating on one-day cricket now, so that's why we're struggling in Test cricket.
That's right, yeah. And
then it goes back, and then they start failing at both, and they're like, oh, we forgot which one to concentrate on.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's very true. But nonetheless, they did pretty well. We didn't mention him, but Josh Butler was horrible. really. Even talk about him possibly retiring, given his form slump.
Well, I think he may as well. He's got a decent podcast and seems to be doing pretty well from that.
Well, I suppose, it was all Butler years ago, I suppose, when England didn't have any other batters coming through. And now with the likes of Will Jacks and Banton and Bethel now, I suppose they don't really need him, really. But anyway, it was an up and down tournament for him. And you could say that about some other batters as well from England. But anyway, that's just the way it goes in T20 cricket. But from their tournament overall, not bad from England, but they will be disappointed not to go on further in the tournament. But it was a bit scratchy, but they did enough to get the job done in terms of qualifying from the group stage to the Super 8s and then into the semi-finals. Let's talk about the co-hosts, Jihan. Let's talk about Sri Lanka. And they did pretty well in the group stage. They did very well to qualify. They won 3 out of the 4 games. They only lost to Zimbabwe in the last game, but it didn't really matter because Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe were already through. Probably their best game out of the group stage was a game against Australia. And obviously what Pathan Masanka did, he scored that wonderful 100 and took that wonderful catch off Glenn Maxwell at backward point, which was an unbelievable catch. He had a pretty good tournament, but in the Super 8s that were dreadful. Probably their best performance in the Super 8s came in the last game where they fell 5 runs short, chasing 200 against Pakistan. Obviously frustrated Pakistan in terms of them qualifying for the semi-finals, but the captain, Dushan Shanaka, did well to get them close in the end. But really the batting sort of failed. It was either Nasanka or bust for Sri Lanka. Once he got out, the rest collapsed. The bowling was heavily weakened by injuries. I think Hasaranga after the first game was out with an injury for the tournament. And I think Pataranda, the game against Australia, he pulled a hamstring or something like that. And he was out. So their strike bowlers had injuries and their bowling attack looked pretty ordinary, especially the game against Pakistan, where Pakistan piled on the runs in that opening partnership. They just looked all at sea, really, and just didn't really get going at all, and probably summed up Sri Lanka really in T20 cricket of late in terms of the inconsistent performances. But your thoughts on Sri Lanka, Jihan? How did you see their tournament? Would you give them a pass or a fail in terms of the overall result?
Yeah, I'd give them a fail. I thought they were pretty poor overall. I said in the preview that I thought the batting was weak. I didn't feel like they had too many big T20 style hitters in their lineup. I thought, if anything, it was going to be their bowling that would be good in this tournament, particularly spin bowling. And I thought, as they tend to do quite well, just generally over the years, they tend to be able to restrict opposition batting teams with the spin bowling in the middle overs. And yeah, I mean, 2 of their worst performances, the worst performances of their tournament, I think of the tournament as a whole, when I think about it, was the loss to England, the loss to New Zealand, when they had them, both teams, on toast, particularly the New Zealand game. England sort of scrapped themselves to 140, 150, but they were always sort of England, even though they're losing wickets, they still had a consistent-ish run rate. Whereas New Zealand, they were completely on top of New Zealand. I think they were like 90 for 6 or something. And then Santner and Bracewell, was it? I can't remember. One of the other New Zealand players, lower order players, just came in and just kept hitting sixes for the last 3 or 4 overs, completely against one play.
Yeah, it was McConkey that did that.
Yes, yeah, McConkey. And that, you just, after being completely on top of them for 15 overs, where the run rate's going nowhere, they've already taken 6 wickets. And then to let them do that, get to a score, and then they could only score 105 or something, where they just completely shut down. It was almost like they forgot how to play T20 cricket.
Yes, I think they got bowled out for 99 against England, did they?
Yeah, and equally poor against England as well. I mean, they're only chasing 140. I mean, they should have easily.
You should be expected to win from those positions, but unfortunately, they weren't able to seize those opportunities.
And that game against England, they were really. I didn't watch the New Zealand when they batted against New Zealand, but the game against England, they really poor dismissals. It was almost like watching schoolboy cricket. Like Nisanka hold out to Jofra Archer at deep mid wicket. Okay, yeah, fine, that can happen every now and then. It's still a poor shot, you know. Why are you hitting the ball in the air to the one fielder on the leg side in the power play? But once he was out, they just collapsed in a heap. And to England spinners as well. They were all terrible shots. I mean, they were playing spin like as if it was England playing against Sri Lankan spinners.
Yes.
So that was really poor. And I think that just highlighted how ineffective their batting was going to be. Because I think apart from one or two players, they just don't have the power in that lineup. They just don't have the quality in the batting. Yet against Australia, they chased down 180 for 2. So it's one of those things where teams have done everything they can possibly do to knock Australia out, and then they forget how to play cricket after that.
Yeah, I suppose after that was such a great high for Sri Lanka. It took a lot of energy. And because they bowled pretty ordinary up front, Australia went down for 100 odd nearly after the halfway point, and then collapsed to be bowled out for 180 odd. But I think after that game, that took a lot out of Sri Lanka as a group, and then after that, they just Zimbabwe they lost 4 games in a row.
Yeah, so I mean they lost to Zimbabwe. So I mean that because I think most people were saying once Australia lost to Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe that Sri Lanka's number 1, Zimbabwe number 2. No, Zimbabwe beat them. So and in that innings, I could kind of tell that they were losing the plot with the ball, and they didn't know what to do. So yeah, I mean, thinking back to that game, that Zimbabwe had only lost 1 or 2 wickets. But they were still quite behind on the run rate. They kept wickets in hand. But then Raza just came out and just belted it everywhere. He played one of those clutch innings that just takes the required run rate from 12 or 13 down to 7 or something. So, and they had no answer to him. They had no answer at all. And then the Zimbabwean lower order finished it off. So, yeah, I think overall really poor. I didn't watch the game against Pakistan, but it sounds like they were getting absolutely flogged for the first 15 overs of that game.
Yes, their bowling was pretty ordinary, really. And misfields and drop catches as well didn't help.
Yeah, so they're just, I think in this format of the game, they're towards the bottom end of that top 8, I would say.
Yeah, no, pretty poor tournament for the co-host Sri Lanka. I suppose their best performance was against Australia, and that was it, really. Outside of that, they were okay. They won against Ireland and Oman. They nearly lost to Ireland as well. We didn't mention that. Ireland didn't do well in terms of finishing off that game, but they could have won. They could have lost that game as well, Sri Lanka. So. Yeah, not a best tournament from the co-host. They were expecting better results. Unfortunately, not meant to be. But I suppose from an individual aspect, in terms of individual performance, I think Pathum Nissanka will be quite happy with his tournament. 100 against Australia, a brilliant catch to get rid of Glenn Maxwell at backward point. I don't know how he caught that. But to win that game for them was a pretty special moment. So I think that's a positive for Sri Lanka. Apart from that, yeah, pretty ordinary after that, really. So that's Sri Lanka's T20 World Cup, a disappointing tournament for the co-host for Sri Lanka. They were expecting better things from this tournament at home. Now, let's talk about Australia, Jihan. The moment has come I know you've been wanting to get this off your chest since Australia were knocked out. But before we get to that, Jihan, basically an overview of Australia. Disappointing group stage. They didn't qualify. They won against Ireland, which everyone expected. Bit of a shock, a banana peel sort of game for them against Zimbabwe. Give credit to Zimbabwe. They played really well in that game. And they played well in this group stage in this tournament. The loss to Sri Lanka, they were in a winning position. You would say probably going to put on 200 plus after Marsh and Head's opening partnership, but they fell away. They collapsed to 180 odd. And obviously the last game against Oman, they got the job done there. They won by 9 wickets, but that was a bit of a hollow victory, if I can say that. Basically selections, injuries to key players, form slumps for key players, basically were the main factors in Australia not performing well, really. And that's the bottom line, really. That's why they were knocked out in the group stage, to everyone's pleasure. But Jihan, it's over to you. You may begin your rant. Get it off your chest. How would you assess Australia's performance? Pretty much a failure, really.
Oh, it was an absolute failure. And I've got to say, it's not like I didn't see it coming. I think I said in the preview that Australia and India would make the final. Well, that was in the middle of that series against Pakistan. But towards the end of that series, when they lost 3-0 and got absolutely hammered in the last 2 games, I just thought, I don't think they're going to do much in this tournament. And I think the issue is for Australia that there's a few problems. One is they had to play their games in Sri Lanka on slower, lower turning wickets, which they have struggled with for a long time now in white ball cricket, in particular. The batting lineup they picked really struggle against spin. Don't really know what they're doing against spin. Can easily tie them down with spinners, be that in the power play or in the middle overs. And the bowling has been terrible since I can remember in T20 cricket. I can't ever remember them having a great T20 bowling lineup.
No, the game against Zimbabwe and Sri Lanka, they only took 4 wickets combined.
4 wickets across 2 games against 2 of the weaker sides in the tournament. So you're not really going to get that far if your bowling is that poor.
Whereas against Ireland and Oman, it was pretty effective. They were able to take wickets, 10 wickets or something like that across those 2 games. But the games against Zimbabwe and Sri Lanka, their bowling was pretty ordinary and not very effective.
No, not effective at all. A complete lack of penetration against, in both of those games, but particularly against Zimbabwe.
And if Josh Hazlewood or Pat Cummins or Mitchell Starc, if he decided to come out of retirement, I don't think it would have made any difference. It's just like what happened 2 years ago in the Caribbean. The same problem happened here, which people don't realize and probably gloss over. Just no, exactly right. I mean, they wouldn't made it. They never did anything in T20, and probably either. Steve Smith as well probably wouldn't have made any difference anyway if he played on.
No, I don't think he would have done. The thing is, even with the Test bowlers, they've never really done much in T20 cricket either.
No, when you think about it, Pat Cummins hasn't really played a lot of T20 cricket of late. It's mainly been Hazlewood and Starc that have played a lot.
Yeah.
For Australia, that is.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit harsh towards Hazlewood because he has put in really good performances in T20 cricket ever since he got a lot more IPL experience.
Even the series against India, the home summer.
He bowled
well against India in that T20 in Melbourne.
Yep, no, he did, and he has done. I mean, he's their best T20 bowler, isn't he? But Starc hasn't done it. Cummins hasn't done it. They both of them got slaughtered in the Caribbean tournament, and even before that, in 2022, Finn Allen took them all apart. The only one that is reasonably consistent is Adam Zampa in the middle. in that game against India and St. Lucia, but even he got taken apart. So, yeah, it's just bowling has been an issue for them for years, actually, in T20. I think that's why they lose, because they don't have the bowling. They've got the power in the batting. Okay, they're struggling on the slow. They struggle on the slow wickets and to play spin. But if you get them on a good wicket and balls coming onto the bat, that's a powerful batting lineup. It's a dangerous batting lineup. That's why everyone wants Australia knocked out of the tournament, because they know what they're capable of. But the problem is the bowling has been really poor for a long time. And the thing is, it doesn't matter as much in one-day cricket, because you can bowl test match lengths. There's a bit more on the wicket that you can have the fielders in catching positions. It doesn't work like that in T20. You have to be able to restrict runs with variations, and just finding ways of stopping the batsman getting under the ball. I mean, there's no point coming in trying to take wickets all the time. It doesn't work like that in T20 cricket. And all these guys, like, they've brought in, Ellis and Xavier Bartlett, and some of them have got good variations, but they still have the tendency to get slaughtered every now and then. I remember back in the day they used to keep picking Kane Richardson, and whenever he played, I can't remember him ever having a good game. It seemed like he always went for 10 runs and over whenever he played, at least. And then, Zampa's done okay, but then the backup spinners, they haven't done anything at all. In the Pakistan series, Connolly, I think first game he did okay. After that, he was getting smashed. Kuhneman was getting smashed. And you can just see by the opposition, they're not threatened by them at all. Just, as soon as they see the ball, they're just like, where am I smashing this?
No, that's right. Yeah, that's true. They weren't really I suppose maybe if the regulars were there, Cummins, Hazelwood and Stark, probably. But,
well, I think where Cummins, Hazelwood and Stark would have made a difference is the games against the Minnows. So probably if they were playing against Zimbabwe, maybe even against Sri Lanka, then it may have been a bit different. But even against the top sides, even that doesn't help either. Because they can get slaughtered as well. Even as well as Hazelwood has been in T20 cricket, even he goes for a lot of runs every few games as well. I remember a game a few years ago on the Sri Lanka tour when they won the first 2 games pretty convincingly, 2-0 up. Third game, they were winning that game hands down. Sri Lanka's 6 down, needing about 13 and over, and then Darshan Shanaka comes in and just starts smacking sixes everywhere.
Yes, he did,
Hazelwood to win that game. It's just like, that's a series you should have won 3-0, but you just gave that last game away. So this has been happening for a while, and with the batting, I think they're just on slow wickets, and when there's a bit of spin, and when they have to play these like different types of spinners, like mystery spinners and leg spinners, and like when they played against Pakistan, they just, what happens is they don't have scoring options, right? And then they get bogged down, and then they end up trying to go for a big shot and getting out. That's exactly what happens. They don't know how to rotate the strike, and then they just don't have scoring options. Like whatever they try ends up being a high risk shot, and they get out. That first game against Pakistan in the warm-up series, they only lost that by 20 runs. But in that, they're chasing, they restrict Pakistan to a reasonable score. I mean, they got a wicket off the first ball. I don't know if you remember that. So they got off to a good start. Got off to a good start, and then the middle order of Pakistan are smashing them every over. They still reasonable score, and then when they're batting, they bring Abrar Ahmed in, and they couldn't take him for more than 3 runs and over. He went for like 2.75 runs and over, and they lost by 20 runs.
With Tariq as well.
Yeah, I mean that's where you're losing the game, and later on in the tournament, Abrar Ahmed's not even playing in the side. He's been dropped by that point because other teams are taking him apart. And
same with Tariq as well.
With Tariq, that they held it. A game against England, they held him back a bit towards the end, and then they were suddenly having to rely on him to get wickets when England were getting towards the score. So England just timed that run chase perfectly. But so something that Australia can't do. And as I said, this has been happening for years. Even I was thinking back to like even the World Cup they won, right? They're still having to chase big scores in the final and the semi-final. The semi-final, I remember Fakhar Zaman just towards the end was smacking the ball everywhere, puts a big score on the board, and then which Australia were completely under pressure when they lost wickets. It took a brilliant innings from Wade and Stoinis at the end to get them over the line, and then even in the final against New Zealand, Kane Williamson's getting 80 off 40 balls. When has he ever done anything in T20 cricket? you know what I mean? Like it's like if you can't keep control Kane,
he played some good innings here and there, and obviously in the final he did on that occasion. But yeah, I understand your point.
If you can't even restrict Kane Williamson, then what are your chances? So yeah, I don't know what they can do about that. I
suppose the only batter that really showed positivity against the spin was Matt Renshaw. Really, I thought he looked really good.
Yeah, I think he did,
especially in the Zimbabwe game. He gave Australia a chance of winning that.
And he played well in the Ireland game as well.
In the Ireland game as well, the partnership with Stoinis in that game was pretty good. Partnership with Maxwell in the Zimbabwe game was good up until it was just too much in the end. But yeah, I thought he was pretty good.
I think. Look, final point of my rant. Then we should probably move on. But I feel like the selection is all over the place as well. I think they keep chopping and changing all the time. They pick different guys to see what they can do instead of trying to pick a winning team and stick with that squad. You got a warm-up series in Pakistan, and guys are like, we're still resting from the big bash. What do you got to rest for? You bowling 4 overs in a game. You're going to prepare for a World Cup on similar pitches. Go and play all those games, but get your best side in there and try to win them. That's how you build a winning habits, right? And a winning team. So I think they pick and mix and match way too much just to see.
It's they test different dip at the supermarket when you're picking lollies. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So they just randomly pick players that they just to see what they can do, kind of thing.
This is a good flavor. No, I don't really like that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean England didn't do that. England go to that series in Sri Lanka straight after the Ashes, and they're trying to get their best team together and win the series, which they did.
Well, that's a bit of concern. If England are doing things better than Australia, then something's really wrong.
Yeah, and Australia have been doing this in T20 cricket for a long time. They're starting to do it in one-day cricket as well, which is worrying. Yeah, I mean, I think back to that.
I suppose it comes back to that. Sorry to cut you off there, Gian, but I suppose it comes back to the point about the caring thing, which a lot of people made a big deal about in terms of the fans not caring in that, which drove me a bit. I don't know. I was a bit frustrated by that. You can't really convince people to be passionate about something that they're not. And we all know the reasons why people like and dislike T20 cricket. Of course, the players care. They care about their performance. What's the point of being there if you don't care? But you can't really force the fans to be invested in something that they're not really passionate about. And really, when Australia got knocked out, you and me can speak about this, Jihan, because we're from Australia. We understand how the cricket media and the landscape works here because we're from the country. Like after a few weeks, people forgot about it. People move on. It's now March. It's the AFL season. Australian rules football. People care about that more than they do about Australia in this T20 World Cup. Besides the time difference, and it was on Amazon Prime as well, and all those other factors. So, really,
what I would say, no, go on.
That's why people have said, they don't really care, and that's why they're doing all these things. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but actually, afterwards, I think more people were angry about it more than you'd think. A lot of, particularly ex-players, came out and were highly critical.
Oh yes, definitely.
What happened. And I think that's
you
expect
that from former players, obviously.
But a lot of those former players didn't even play T20 cricket, so that's
no, not really. They only played 1 or 2 or none.
Yeah. So I think that surprised some people that it was still a big deal for a lot of ex-players. But yeah, I was going to say, like, I think the preparation for the 22 World Cup was horrendous as well. I mean, you're coming into a home tournament, you play that series against England, and they lost 2 games that they should have won by 8 runs, really close run games, and that just completely knocked their confidence before the opening game against New Zealand, where Finn Allen took them apart. And I remember when they go to that final game or second game in Perth, and half the squad don't go because they don't want to fly to Perth. I mean, that's not commitment at all. I mean, what is that? We don't want to get on a 4-hour flight. It's still an international game. It's still in the same country. Yeah, it's a bit far, but you just, you're going over to play a 20-over game, and as part of the preparation for the World Cup. And I remember Aaron Finch saying before the World Cup started, "Oh yeah, we're tired." I mean, that's not a good sign, is it? If your captain's saying we're tired before the tournament even starts, particularly when the tournament is right at the start of the cricket season. Yeah, so I think they've got a lot of things like that wrong. But it's something that's easily correctable. Maybe they should look at other teams and how they do it, like in terms of selection and building a squad and building
probably looking
consistent team.
Specialist players.
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely more. I mean, they have they're playing specialist players, but then if you keep chopping and changing all the time, they're never going to be able to be cohesive.
Yes,
as a team.
And maybe look at the Big Bash as well. Is the Big Bash producing quality players to play T20 cricket? That's the question as well. So they may need to look at every aspect.
I reckon these days probably not. The quality isn't as high as the IPL produces.
Oh no, I don't think anyone can match the IPL. Obviously,
for T20 cricket anyway. It didn't used to be like that. First few years of IPL and BBL, the BBL used to be a higher quality. A lot of the local Indian players, the ones that weren't international players, weren't actually that good in those days. Yeah, I mean, a classic example of this selection that makes no sense is when they dropped Matt Renshaw. You're already struggling, then you drop the player that's in the best form.
I think he was dropped for Connolly. I think Connolly came back in for him.
Was it Connolly? Was it?
Yeah.
So you drop your most in-form player for your most out-of-form player. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
No, that didn't really make any sense. And also the form of players as well. Glenn Maxwell and Marcus Stoinis were probably didn't like their age, really, in the way they played. I think Maxwell in that game against Zimbabwe, he was really struggling in the heat when he was batting. And Marcus Stoinis, he took a few wickets with the ball, but the batting side of things, he made us some runs, but he didn't look at his fluent best as he usually would. So maybe Australia will need to rethink the plans going forward, because really they have to rely on rankings to qualify for the next tournament, because they didn't finish in the Super 8s. So they don't automatically qualify. They have to finish in the rankings to qualify for the next tournament, which is at home, along with New Zealand. And also the Olympics coming up as well, in terms of the 6 teams to qualify for that. So they need to really knuckle down and start building some consistency.
Yeah, the one last thing I'd say is one thing that's been cropping up in the way Australia play in the last few years, and this is actually across all formats, is when they're absolutely miles ahead and about to, put the team into a great position, they just completely fall away. And they did that against Sri Lanka in this tournament. They were 120 or 110 for no wicket, going at like 10s. And then they just crawl their way to 160 or something.
Yes, they were 9 for 70 after the power play.
Yeah.
And
so they keep
181 all out.
In
the game. So
so they just completely fell away. It's almost like those last few overs was like, it was painful to watch. It was really painful to watch, because they couldn't get the ball away. They were just losing wickets. And this is after 10, 15 overs of scoring at 12 over.
And also Sri Lanka were weakened by an injury to Patarana at the time.
Exactly. Sri Lanka bowled down as well. So
and they weren't bowling really that well, really, to be honest.
Yeah. And they've done this like for the last few, like it happened in the Adelaide Test match where they randomly collapsed and they should have really set England 500 to win. I remember in the World Cup game against New Zealand where they were about 200 after 25 overs and then just like crawl their way to 380 and almost lose that game. So it's like when they have a huge advantage, they just don't know how to push that through and just go in the opposite direction and completely turn it over back to the opposition, which is frustrating to watch.
Yes, it is. I think that's the round over, Jihan. So good to get that off your chest. A bit of a therapy session.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
But final thoughts on Australia. Basically, just a poor tournament. Didn't go to plan, but they've got to be better for the next one in 2 years from now because it's a home tournament alongside New Zealand, and also got to think about qualifying for that, and also the Olympics as well. Not their greatest performance, probably their worst performance in the T20 World Cup, probably since 2009, which many people have said it was, and definitely it was. So there's a lot of work to do from the T20 side of things for Australia going forward, but I think Jihan got everything off his chest there in that round there. Anyway, that's Australia. Not a great tournament. Pretty disappointing in the end for Australia.
Yeah, main thing is they have to improve their bowling. That's the last point I made. Just improve your bowling in T20.